That's come out. We're sorry about last week. Just couldn't help the weather. But we're here tonight, and I think it's going to be a really wonderful program. I think you'll be glad you came. Check and see if it looks like about everyone's here. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. I don't want to miss anybody, but I do want to make a few announcements before the presentation starts. First of all, just on behalf of Northwest Arkansas Beekeepers Association, I want to welcome each of you. My name is Annette Edwards-Rowe, and I am currently the president of the Northwest Arkansas Beekeepers, and I'm going to point out the board of directors tonight. A lot of them are here, and so when I call your name, if you would just wave, so people know who the board of directors for the Northwest Arkansas Beekeepers Association. Xavier Price. Where are you? Okay, there's Xavier. We have Jay Davidson. Carrie Stoles. She's over here filming. We have Katie Hill. Katie is in the back. We have Maureen Grace. I think she's out at the table by the entry. Winfred Isbacher. He's over here. Okay, and then Stephen Ost is another one. I don't think Stephen is here tonight. But we're glad you're here, and I think I've already said 3 times to grab snacks. You can tell we don't want to take all those home with us, so we want you to have snacks. And by the way, we are so grateful for those that pitched in and helped tonight, and I'm going to tell you a few of those. Washington County Conservation District provided snacks and drinks for us tonight. McKee Bakery and Gentry donated some Little Debbie cakes. We also have water bottles that were donated by City of Fayetteville Recycling, and at the end of the evening, we have those outside. If you would like to have one, you can pick it up, and we'll try to remind you at the end. Also, we had a few pens donated from Brian Denman from Edward Jones, and those are on the table. And then Andrew Wong from Hogeye Honey is a vendor, and he's just outside the door, so be sure and take a look at the things that he brought tonight. He's a local supplier of bee equipment. Okay, let me ask you, can you guys hear me at the back? I can't tell how loud I'm talking. We did have to alter our schedule for the classes, as you know, from last week. They canceled last week and start the first part of the class this week. So we will have the second part in 2 weeks. So on the 20th, we will meet here again, just like this, for the second part of the beginner beekeeping training. So mark that on your calendar. Okay, we will, tonight we'll have some presentations on various topics until around 7:20, and then we'll have a little break so you can get more snacks, or you can just mingle with people, or maybe have time to ask some questions. And we're also going to have a couple of door prize drawings. So be sure you have a ticket. Did anyone not get a ticket when you walked in?
I needed about 10.
You need a what?
No, she needed about 10.
Oh, I got 10 tickets. I don't think anybody got 10, but hey, I don't know for sure. Okay, just to give us an idea of, and give our presenters an idea of who they're talking to tonight. Water. I'm going to grab my water. I want to ask a few. I'm going to grab this. I think this is. If you are here tonight and you've never been a beekeeper, you've never had a hive, you're just learning about beekeeping, would you raise your hand? Wow. This really is a beginner beekeeper training. Hey, we're so glad you're here. This is a great place to start. Okay. Let me see, who has dabbled in beekeeping? Maybe you've had a hive in the past, maybe you had some luck with it or didn't have luck, but you're just kind of have dabbled a little bit in beekeeping. Okay, so there are a few of you. And then how many of you currently, maybe been a beekeeper for a couple of years? You actually got a hive that lasted through the winter and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we have a few of those. And how many do we have here that have been beekeepers, say 5 years or longer? Okay, that's probably gonna be mostly the people from the club. I'm just wondering, is there pollen in the air maybe? We have, some sunshine, something could have. So the goal of this class tonight is to, and it looks like we have a great audience for this reason. It's just to help you decide if you want to become a beekeeper. There's really a lot to learn about beekeeping, and there's some expense to it, and there's just a lot more upkeep to beekeeping than you might imagine. So tonight will be a good kind of an introductory class to let you kind of start to get the feel of, is this something I really want to do? But really, I would say even if you've been a beekeeper for a while, you're going to learn some things tonight. There's just a lot in these videos and also the presenters. Okay, I was supposed to remind you to turn your phones off, silence your phones. Almost forgot. So if you would just do that. Also, you'll find that we have paper and pens on the tables, and if you have extras, just pass them maybe to a table that didn't get very many. If you have a question, we're not going to stop in the middle of the presentation because we have so much to cover. If you have a question that pops into your mind, Julie, hey, I didn't see you. Just go ahead and jot down your question so that you won't forget it. We don't want you to, not be able to remember what you wanted to ask, but we're just not going to stop a whole bunch during the presentations because of the time constraints. Also, let's see. All right, also this is an item of importance. You'll see that there's a sign, every table should have a sign-in sheet. This is simply a record of your attendance tonight, and you would just put your name on that sheet, and if you need another sheet or we need to pass to a table that didn't get it, we can just pass those around, but just ask for your name. We will have a record of how many attended, quite a few of you. All right, and of course the class tonight is free, open to the public, no charge at all. However, if you would like to become, you can decide later or you can decide now, but we invite you to become part of the Northwest Arkansas Beekeepers Association, and the membership is $15 a year, not much at all, but you really get access to a lot of things throughout the year. We meet monthly, and we have great presentations every month. We also do some special some special things throughout the year, just other opportunities to learn from each other. And then in October, we have a nice picnic where we get together, and last year we had a honey contest and just some things like that. So you really get an opportunity to really mingle with a lot of other beekeepers and learn a lot. So if you would like to become a member of Northwest Arkansas Beekeepers Association, there is a form on the table for that. But also, there is a QR code if you want to scan. You can do it online too. We have Katie is in the back, and at break, if you decided you wanted to, the lady in the back, Katie, can you wave your hand? She's going to be here at least part of the evening, and that would be the lady you would turn your membership form into the application for membership if you decide you want to join. But you can do it online anytime, at home or. Let's see. Okay, I think that's it. I think we're just about ready for our first presentation. So somebody's gonna get that started. So again, thank you for being here. And first, we're gonna start with a short introductory video.
This is what you want to do, right? This is where you're heading. If you want to be a beekeeper, you're not alone. Obviously, there's a lot of people here that want to get started in beekeeping, and I've been teaching this class now for about a dozen years. We had to take off recently for COVID, but we've been doing this a long time, and every year we've got a new crop of beekeepers. It's a very popular hobby, and everybody seems to want to get into it, but it is work. It's like gardening. It's a labor of love. It's a lot easier to go to the grocery store and buy a tomato than to grow them. But that homegrown tomato is going to taste a lot better than anything you can buy at the store this time of year, right? It's the same with honey. Once you've tasted your own fresh honey from your own backyard, you can't go back to that store-bought stuff. So there's a lot easier ways to get honey, but all that work just makes it a little bit sweeter. It is expensive to get started, so don't get sticker shock. But most of the costs for beekeeping are on the front end, and if you take care of that equipment, it's going to last you a long time. If you take care of your bees, they'll stay healthy. They should last a while too. There's a fairly steep learning curve, and it does require some commitment. People are under the impression that you can just buy a wooden box and dump a bunch of bugs in it, and then nature takes care of everything else. It used to be that way, but it's a lot harder now. It's a lot more challenging to keep bees, and you're definitely going to have to put a little bit of time and effort into this. But the time is now. This is the perfect time for you guys to be taking this class and getting started, because early spring is the best time to start up a brand new beehive. They are in high demand. They're also in short supply, because coming out of the winter, a lot of beekeepers have lost colonies that they want to replace, or they may have just lost queen bees, so they want to buy new queens to put in there. And so the later it gets in the season, then the harder it is to be able to even find bees for sale. A lot of producers sell out in the early spring because there is high demand. So if you want to get those bees, then you need to get your name on a list early usually. So that means starting in January or so, you want to reserve. Sometimes you have to put down a deposit. If you don't, you can still get them, but they may not arrive until May or sometimes even into June. And you're going to miss out on the early spring flowers. They're going to help your bee colonies grow up and really build their population. So, of course, don't forget to get your beehives and other equipment that we're going to talk about tonight. So you can get it all ready, get it painted, put it all together, so that when your bees do arrive, they're not homeless. You've got a place to put them. Beekeeping in these nice little white boxes you sometimes see on the side of the road or on a farm. This is relatively new in our relationship with the honeybees. We've been using this type of hive for about 150 years or so, but we have been keeping bees for thousands of years in lots of different ways. Back when people lived in caves and they clubbed their dinner over the head with a big stick, honeybees were already organized in a very complex society. They looked out for each other. They would hunt and gather all of their own resources. At some point, somebody saw something like this and said, I'm going to stick my hand in there and I'm going to eat whatever I find. No telling what they were thinking, but I guess I'm glad that they did, because of course that started our wonderful association with the honeybee. Somebody found that honey was delicious stuff. There's still places in the world where people do hunt wild beehives and they chop open trees and they take the honey out that way, but there are much easier ways to do it. We have cave paintings and rock art and things like that all over the world depicting different ways where people are collecting honey. This one over here on the left side is supposed to be over 6,000 years old. This is from a cave in Spain. It's supposed to show someone gathering honey on the side of a cliff surrounded by honeybees. This guy is in Nepal. He's still doing the same method today. He's dangling over the side of a cliff, no bee suit, no smoke, trying to knock a honeycomb off the rock into a basket while hanging on to a homemade ladder. There's easier ways to do this. The Egyptians were probably the first people that really figured out how to do it. They noticed that if they left a piece of pottery outside or a basket or something like that, that a swarm of bees would naturally nest inside of it. If they couldn't find a hollow tree, they looked for some other kind of cavity. And so they created beehives that were kind of long cylindrical terracotta pipes, or sometimes they would use hollow logs. And the ancient Egyptian ruins have lots of illustrations of farming and everyday life, and there's a lot of scenes that depict beekeeping. And they knew what time of year they could go in and they could blow smoke in there and drive the bees out and cut out all those honeycombs and harvest the honey. So they were the first ones to really kind of figure that out. And in the Middle East and in different places, a lot of them still use the same type of beehive today. All the ancient peoples kept bees in some way or other, took advantage of them, and so you see honeybees depicted in lots of different art and jewelry and on coins. They knew a fair amount about beekeeping and honeybees. Aristotle actually wrote a whole treatise on beekeeping, but he had a lot of strange ideas as well that, of course, we realize now are wrong. One of the things that ancient people believed was that if you bury an ox in the ground up to its neck, a dead ox, I don't think you do with a live one, then a swarm of bees would issue from it. Well, if you leave a dead cow laying around, you are going to get a lot of insects, but you're not going to get a lot of honey from it. But for some reason that got written down and people believed it for a long time. Another piece of ancient lore was the idea that if you do see a swarm of bees, you take out your big metal kitchen pan and a big metal spoon and you bang them together, and it will call the bee swarm down and they'll land somewhere where you can collect them. And a lot of people actually believed this until quite recently, and some of y'all may have heard of this from your grandparents. People would practice this, it was called tanging. And so it's depicted in a lot of illustrations in ancient beekeeping literature. The truth is, it doesn't really matter if you're banging on your pots and pans. Honeybees don't travel very far when they leave their hive, before they settle down anyway. We'll talk about that swarming behavior later. But if you run out into the street, banging your kitchenware together, essentially what you've done is call attention to it, and you've called dibs on that swarm that you saw, because you couldn't just call on the phone with your credit card and order bees to be sent to you in the mail back then. The only way to get more bees usually was to capture a swarm. So that was a good way to do it. What people didn't know about bees is that they needed shelter. Honeybees like to live in hollow trees or some other cavity, and so we can provide them with some kind of shelter, and we can make them reasonably happy, and they can produce honey for us. We know that bees visit flowers because that's where you see them all, and we know that bees need fresh water because you'll also see them, especially in hot weather, down by the creek, lapping up a little bit of water and taking it home with them. And of course, it's a good idea to keep the honeybees away from livestock, or actually to keep your livestock away from the honeybees. Cows aren't very smart. If they're in the same pasture with beehives, sometimes they'll rub up against them and just knock them over and not realize why they're being stung. Horses also get stung, but they're a little smarter and they hold a grudge. Several people have told me that their horses have kicked over their beehives when they got stung. And when you set the hives back up, you leave them in the same pasture, the horses come back and kick them over again because they remember that those beehives were so mean. So you want to make sure that you keep them out of the way. If you've got chickens or other poultry, you can actually keep them in the same yard with honeybees, and they do very well together. Your hens will actually eat some of the other insects that like to get into beehives. We'll talk about that later on in our lessons. So people didn't necessarily know a whole lot about beekeeping or about honeybee biology and things, but they knew enough to get by. In Europe, honeybees were just another wild species, and if you just left one of these straw baskets upside down, then bees would naturally nest inside of it. Sometimes they would keep bees in the trees. You'd find a wild bee's nest. It was not uncommon in some places to just chop open the tree, remove some of the honeycombs, or all of them, depending on what you wanted to do, and you might even take a plank of wood and tie it back shut. If you didn't take all the honey, the bees survive. You can come back next year, just mark that tree, and you know where it is. You can come and get a little bit more. Or if trees fell down, you could take a whole section, you could chop them down, drag it back to the farm, and you could keep the bees inside of those. It was common to carve them into different fanciful shapes as well. This gentleman is in Russia. He's showing off a tree with a mark that his grandfather made. And so he and his son are still keeping bees in the same tree. They go through the forest, they know where all the trees are, and exactly what time of year, and he can climb up there and take a couple of honeycombs from each one, and it's plenty for him and his family. So that's some sustainable beekeeping there. For much of Europe, this was the classic beehive we call a skep. It's a straw basket turned upside down, and oftentimes they might have put a little hole in it, or you simply put a rock under one corner and prop it up, and the bees can go up underneath it. A lot easier to carry these around than hollow logs or terracotta pots, so this became a very popular way to keep bees in a lot of places. They often kept bees up on castle walls, so the bees could fly out into the countryside and gather nectar and make honey. And of course, if your castle is under siege by some invaders, you can simply push the hives off and drop them on people's heads. So they were used as defense very often as well. Skeps were basically just straw baskets turned upside down, like I said, but they would often weave some sticks into it, and it provided a little bit of support when the bees started to make their honeycomb. But basket making was a common skill, and so these were very easy to make. And at the end of the year, you would just come along, at the end of the summer, you'd pick one up. If it was nice and heavy, then you could harvest the honey from it by holding it over a sulfur fire and killing all the bees. So you punish the bees that did all the hard work by killing them. If it was kind of light, those bees were lazy, they didn't do much, weren't very productive, then you'd let them last another year. But there always seemed to be plenty of bees, so they would just put the empty skeps out again next year, and more swarms would move in. Now, when people came over here to the New World, the colonists brought lots of their favorite plants and animals with them. There were no honeybees in North and South America. They're not native to this side of the world. And so they brought them from Europe, and the honeybees thought it was great over here. There was lots of old growth forest on the East Coast, lots of hollow trees, plenty of wildflowers, and there wasn't a lot of competition from the native bees. There are lots of bees that are native, and there's about 4,000 species of bees native to North America. We've got over 200 or 300 here just in Arkansas. But they didn't live in large colonies. They didn't make lots of honey like the honeybees. So the honeybees, of course, became very popular. And we didn't have a lot of straw over here. We didn't have vast fields of grain like they did in Europe, where they had cut down a lot of forests, but we had plenty of wood. And so we started keeping bees in box hives like this, or in hollow log hives here in the New World. And so this was very common until fairly recently in a lot of places. But no matter where the bees are, no matter what they're living inside of, they tend to behave in the same way. And they like to build their honeycombs parallel to each other with a little bit of space in between, starting in the top of the cavity and working down. So the longer they live in there, then the longer those honeycombs become. So inside of a hollow tree, sometimes it may not be a space that's very big around, but the honeycombs could be 6, 7, 8 feet tall, all up inside of that hollow tree. Sometimes they show up in surprising places where we don't expect them. So it's very important, if you're an urban beekeeper, to be conscientious of your neighbors, do your best to manage and control for swarms so that they don't get out and try to move into your neighbors' structures or other strange places. But we kept bees for thousands of years before somebody realized that, hey, wait a minute, these combs are always about the same thickness. They're about an inch thick. And they always leave a little bit of space in between them, no matter where they build them. And so this became a revolutionary concept when it was really understood. We call this the bee space. And it's probably the most important concept for you as a beekeeper. So if you're taking notes, write that down, underline it, put some little stars around it, and circle it a couple times. That concept makes everything work. And when we violate the bee space, it makes everything go wrong. And I'll come back to that concept again and again as we're working. But it's not one exact measurement. It's kind of a range between about 1/4 inch and 3/8 of an inch. But generally we consider 3/8 of an inch to be the bee space. It's enough room for 2 honeybees to work back to back on different honeycombs and not get in each other's way, but be able to move freely around. Any space inside of a hive that is larger than 3/8 of an inch, the honeybees are going to build a comb in there. So if you have any gaps, any spaces, the bees are going to utilize that by constructing honeycomb, either to store food or to make cells that the queen can use to lay eggs. So that's what they store in these spaces. If there's any space smaller than, and this is what happens if you have too much space. They build combs in weird places. So if you leave an extra amount of space in there, then it causes problems. Any space that's smaller than 1/4 of an inch, honeybees don't like. They can't use it. And it's a place for other species of insects and pests to get in, to hide, and cause mischief. And so they seal it off. Bees go out and they gather this material called propolis. It's a resin that they collect from trees, and they kind of use it like caulking. They seal up cracks and crevices in the hive, so when we stack 2 beehive boxes together, they always seal up any gaps in between there with this propolis. It's really sticky and gooey, and sometimes you hear it called bee glue, and sometimes it can stick the hive together so hard it's almost impossible to open them up. It will get on everything you own as a beekeeper if you're not careful. In fact, I was out at my hives this weekend, and I took a picture of something, and later I discovered that I had propolis all over my cell phone, so you gotta be careful with that. But it gets on your clothes, it gets on your gloves, on your tools, and everything else, and it's really hard to get off. Bees also coat everything inside the hive with a paper-thin layer of this propolis. They smear it around anything that shouldn't move, but does, the bees seal it in place. Any space in there that's smaller than a 1/4 inch, the bees just fill it in. And if we design and build our hives in the right way, we keep that gap to just the right amount, then the bees don't fill it in. They use it to travel between parts of the hive. They don't build comb there, and they don't fill it with propolis. And so this bee space, proper use of the bee space, is what makes everything work in our modern beehives. It's the basis for what we call the movable frame hive. It is against the law to keep honeybees in any type of hive that you can't remove and inspect the honeycombs. So no more straw skeps, no more log hives. You have to be able to take those combs out and be able to inspect and see what the bees are doing. That doesn't mean you're breaking the law if you have a bee tree on your property, but you're not allowed to maintain bees for honey and things like that if you can't have access to those frames. But this allows us to take one honeycomb out, inspect it, look at it, see what the bees are doing, assess them for health, make sure that the bees have enough room to produce more honey and things like that. We can look and see if the honey is ready to harvest. We'll cover all of this in more detail later, but we can do this without having to destroy everything the bees have made. In the old days, you couldn't do that. Once you got into a beehive, you tore everything up, and the bees had to rebuild it all from scratch. So we can rearrange the combs. You can put them in different parts of the hive, you can raise them, you can lower them, you can encourage the bees to work in different parts of the hive without disturbing them all. And when bees get disturbed, of course, they get a little frustrated with us, and so that's when you might get stung. But think about it from their point of view. If somebody took the roof off of your house and started moving all your stuff around, you might get a little irritated with that as well, especially some really huge giant. So from the bees' point of view, we are invaders, we are disturbing them, and they're going to treat us as such. Testing. Working. It worked. Okay.
Hey, I'm Roro. I'm also the other half of this lady right here. And she had allowed me to present tonight. And when you get into beekeeping, you need somebody called a mentor. Do I see this from the people, especially those people that are called newbies, which means that you've never had, you like to have somebody that you can ask questions of, you know that, okay. And David here, David Cheek is my mentor. And anytime I have a question, I can go to David and say, well, now I'm going to teach you something here in a second that all beekeepers are part of. But let's go to it here. And all of you hope to have hives all lined up and pretty and all. By the way, hives don't stay pretty like that. That propolis that they were talking about, it doesn't last very long. This is what I really want you to remember. When you start talking to a bunch of beekeepers, it says, first rule of beekeeping, please keep this in mind the rest of the presentation. Ask 10 beekeepers for their opinion on a question and you will get 13 different answers. That's not bad, as there's usually more than one right answer. You've heard of all these people throughout the world that have raised bees, and they figured out a way. And that's what you're going to try to do. Beekeepers are stubbornly independent and deep-thinking individuals. And if you look at the people around here who are, they can say, yes, we can even be that word called cantankerous. If I could name 6 different subjects and we could have a violent verbal fight over them in here, and at the same time, we're all right. You know what I'm saying? It's just, so I want you to keep that in mind. When somebody says something about something, you need to have a filter, because you're going to become beekeepers yourselves. And you're going to develop your own opinion. You're going to listen to people, and then you're going to say some of that stuff is, you don't tell people that, because then you get into these horrible fights and stuff. But you decide which direction you want to go and go that way. There's a gentleman by the name of L.L. Langstreth, and he's considered the father of modern beekeeping or American beekeeping. He invented this hive. If you look at it here, that you all see as you drive through the countryside or in town, you see these white boxes. There are other methods. Remember I told you there are different beekeepers that do different things, and it's like, but this is the one that I would say 90%, this is the one that you will use as a new beekeeper. And it's real, you remember the bee space that he was talking about just a minute ago? This whole thing is built around bee space. You have these things called frames that sit in here. And guess what the distance is between the two frames? 3/8 of an inch. Guess what the distance is when you go down the side, between the side and the frame? 3/8 of an inch. What's the distance between the bottom of the box and the next box, or the bottom of it there? 3/8 of an inch. Because what do the bees do if you don't keep that in mind?
They fill it.
They'll fill it. And one of the great things that you can do, if you have a shorter frame like this, and you forget to bring out one that's the right size, and you put this in, do you know what the bees do with the bottom? They fill it for you. They make a nice frame, and then you take it out and you try to set it down. And it's full of eggs and things, so you don't want to kill it and throw it away or what. It creates quite a bit of problem. But anyhow, he came up with this concept, or he used the bee space method, but he also did something else. All those other hives that you saw from ancient history, when they harvested the honey, what happened to the bees? They killed them. And you just destroyed the hive basically to get the honey. This way, you can open up the hive, work the hive, take out the honey, put it back together again. And David here, when we were talking about this, he said, yes, Earl, and it's a state law. You want to tell him what it is?
State law is that you've already seen before that you have to keep bees in a box where you can take the frames out and inspect them and see that if there are diseases or see if there's a queen in there or whatever you need to look for. And to start off with this, the beehive, the first thing we're going to have is the bottom board.
Well, tell them about this first here.
What's that?
This is all the beehive.
Okay, this is all the parts of the beehive.
And did you want to tell them about all these vocabulary words? And you all know that you're entering a new subject area, and every time they hit you with all these terms, and you're supposed to learn what all these terms are. Like brood box, queen exclude, supers, inner cover, deep frame, medium frame, shallow frame, foundation. Are these words you all use on a daily basis? Okay, these will be part of your beekeeping terminology. Bottom board, solid or screen, hive stand, entrance reducer, propolis, and the other word you can just substitute is call it bee glue. And that's truly the thing. You cannot take a hive apart without a hive tool, because everything is glued together. And you can go out there and you can make them greatly mad trying to take it apart as you're bouncing the hive and trying to. But anyhow, these are the parts of and there will be a quiz here in just a minute over all these. Not really here. Okay, David, tell them about first of all, you got to tell them about a hive stand.
Hive stand.
There you go. I'll put up a picture of the hive stand.
Yeah, put a picture up there. Let me see what it says. All right, you can use concrete blocks and put those 4x4s along and put the hives on them, or you can have a metal stand and, set the hives on them, and you can just set them just as close together as you want to, but you still need room to, whenever you go to inspect them, you have to have room to put the lid and the frames and stuff, so, but you can have
Tell them what's the most common one here.
Cinder blocks.
most common was concrete blocks. And you need to get them up off the ground.
And really, what the hive stand is for is basically to keep the hives off the ground, to give them some ventilation, and also, you gotta remember that you're working these hives. Would you rather work them here, or would you rather work them here? You understand what I'm saying? You wanna get them, now at the same time, if you're really fortunate and they grow, you don't wanna get them too high up in the air, because then you have to go get a step ladder or something to work them. But anyhow, the key is you want them to be strong, because these hives are gonna weigh a lot. You're gonna find out that as you work with these, and we're gonna tell you, they need to be stable. So if winds come along or rain, the metal ones up there, those are great except for this time of year, when you get the freeze and the thaw, and all of a sudden those lakes might start, as the ground changes, and if it leans over at all, what's gonna happen? And the bees are not happy. I can tell you when you go out to work them and put them together. Okay, let's do the
skunks.
Okay, tell them about skunks.
One reason that you want to get them off the ground is because of skunks. And skunks like to try to get in there, and they'll get up to the hive and they'll scratch on the hive, and the bees come out, and then they get the bees. But if you got them up off the ground, the skunks has got to get up. And then when the bees come out, they sting them on the stomach where they're tender. And so that kind of protects your bees from the skunks and other varmints. Okay, the bottom boards, and this one that I'm going to show you here is the solid bottom board.
I'll hold it for you.
And you can use either side of it. If you put this on the bottom, if you put your hive on this, that's quarter of an inch.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to use the other side, you can have 3/8 of an inch.
And this sits on the hive stand, okay? Okay, this is the basis. What's the difference between this and a screen room?
Well, the screen one, you didn't bring a screen
I didn't
one,
bring a
did you?
screen room, but I got a picture of one, right?
Okay, there's a screen one. A screen one has some advantages. Some people like to use them. Some people say they will not use them. But one reason I use them is because when what do they call them?
Mites.
Varroa mites. Varroa mites are real small. They get on the bees, and sometimes they'll fall off the bees. And when they do, they'll fall through that screen and fall down on the ground and die. If they fall down on the solid bottom board, then when the bees come into the hive, they can jump back on the bees.
That makes sense? Yes. Okay, and the same thing with small hive beetles.
Yeah.
Is it solid underneath there, or is it open to the ground?
It's open to the ground.
It's an open screen.
Oh,
all
okay,
the
so
way
it looks
to-
like it's just like that with
Yeah.
a screen over it. Okay,
Yeah.
Well, it's like this, but this is cut out, and you
right?
just have a screen over this. And then if the varroa mite falls off the bees, and they're rubbing up against each other and stuff, they'll fall through. If they fall on this, they just get on another bee that comes in the hive. But if they fall through the screen, they drop to the bottom, and
Are
it takes.
those mites seasonal?
Actually, they're in the hives right now. They will live through the winter in the hives. So there are times in the year that there are more of them.
Yeah,
But it's really bad if you have them in your hive right now, because there's not many bees. The smallest population you're gonna have is right now. And I know I don't need to be, if you write down, save the question, but
Yeah.
this is the purpose to help you with your pests. They also, we had a camera thing. We had an Arkansan. You know how people are inventors? We had a Mr. Freeman that came up and he said, well, I can go that screen one better. He made a little tray that you slide in underneath that screen, and you put some vegetable oil and some apple cider vinegar, and then hive beetles say, that smells good, and they drop down in there, and you know when they get in the oil, they suffocate, and they can't get back out of there, and it's wonderful. You know, it's one of the things that you've heard bees are in trouble. Basically, if you read a beekeeping book from 25, 30 years ago, you don't hear varroa mite, small hive beetle, all those things. I think I could have raised bees 30 years ago. You know, it's one of those that I think it was much easier, but we are an area where, in a world today where things get together quite quickly. Let me see if I had anything else to say here. I said something about Mr. Freeman. He passed away about a year ago, but if you do keep bees, you'll probably be getting one of his traps to go under your bottom board. Okay, we have brood chambers. And if you notice up here, I say where the queen lives, hopefully. Because the queen can cause some problems. Is usually there are the two bottom boxes in your hive. And that's where they bring in nectar. That's where they bring in pollen. That's where she lays her eggs. That's where they stay the winter. This is the main course of your brood boxes, and that's one of them right here. And these brood boxes can be any size. There are 3 different sizes. This is called a deep. Remember, you saw the thing that and if you look at the bottom box on this one here, that's a deep box. The next size up, yeah,
The medium.
that's a medium. If you hold this, David, let's put 2 of them together. This is a deep. This is a medium. Then you also have a shallow. What do you think the reason that people would go from having a deep to a medium box?
They don't know how much they weigh.
I think maybe. And this is what you call a 10-frame box. In fact, those over there are 10-frame boxes. These over here, I think, are 8-frame boxes. Why would you go from 10 frames to 8 frames? Weight. For those of us that are moving along in years.
You talking about me?
No. I had a mentee last year, Roy Pearson. You want to do this? So Roy's right back here, and he's a fine, strapping young guy out there. And he had a bunch of deeps. And what are you doing this year, Roy? He's decided that he wants all of his boxes to be mediums. So instead of having 2 deeps on the bottom, you could have 3 mediums. It takes the same amount of space. You know what I'm saying? It's the same. Or here in Arkansas, we're basically talking about 2 boxes. You could have a deep and a medium. It's really handy if all your boxes are the same size. That way you never end up with that problem. You took a frame out to fill up and all of a sudden it's the wrong size, you know, and it gets you in trouble later. Okay, so you know about the deeps, the mediums, and the shallows. Boxes and frames. And there they are. It shows you the difference. 9 5/8 is what, they're all the same length. All the same width. Height is the only difference. 9 5/8, 6 5/8, 5 11/16. You might say, well, if it's all weight and stuff, why don't I do all shallows? Make sense? These all cost about the same, or really close to the same, and it takes a whole lot of shallows to get you the same amount of honey as a deep. You're going to have to make a lot more boxes. You're going to have to make a lot more frames. You know, it just takes. So it's a thing that you have to justify to yourself. A deep box full of honey will weigh between 80 and 100 pounds. And you're picking it up like this. And you've got these bees that are not so happy with you, while you're doing all this, and Roy was out there. I was working my hives last year, and I was so happy. I said, Roy, come out. I'll teach you some stuff about bees. My next to the last hive, I tweaked my back, and I was so glad Roy was there to help me finish up, And if you're young in here, all of us older beekeepers want to become your friend. So you can come help us with our bees as we're working on this year. Okay, supers. Do you all like honey? A lot of people think that you're getting into beekeeping so that you can get lots of honey, right? I'll give you a hint. Go buy honey. It's cheap. And I'm correct on, I try to keep the facts from Mrs. Rowe over there about how much I actually spend getting beehives together and stuff. And for all of you, it's going to, if you're starting and you don't have anything, it's going to be $500 to $700 for you to get started. There are different ways around it. I'm a simple beekeeper, simple woodworker, and I can build my own tools, and my son is a construction person back there, and construction sites, you see all those piles of wood, when they get done, they throw it on. Well, he collects it for me. So I'm basically getting my materials for free. If you get 1x materials, if you know what I'm talking about, 1x4s, 1x6, 1x8s, you're halfway on your way to building your own equipment. Supers are those areas where the honey is collected, where we try to keep the queen from laying eggs. They sit up on top of the brood boxes. Okay? This is where, and I think I'm fairly safe in saying you will not find supers like that in this area of Arkansas. I'm looking at the people in the club here that, no. North Dakota, South Dakota, some of those areas we'll have maybe 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 at the most. Last year, I think the biggest one I had was 3. David put 3 on all of his, and they all filled up, so. Anyhow, that's what supers are those boxes above. And they're mediums. As I told you, I had some deeps that I used last year, but I'm not going to do that this year anymore. I've made that step. Queen excluder, right? Okay, in between your brood box and your supers, you can sometimes put what's called a queen excluder. The queen is too big to go through that. Your other bees, your worker bees, can, and they can go up above. Sometimes they're called honey excluders because the bees don't naturally go up there. You remember they're full of honey and stuff. Why would they want to squeeze through that little area and get up above? Unless you trick them by putting a frame or 2 up there that's already got honey or something that draws them up, and then once they're up there, they're going to work that area. But this keeps the queen out because you don't want the queen laying eggs in what you're going to make honey out of. Does that make, I have a thing about I don't want to kill all those little bees coming along, and it doesn't improve the flavor of your honey to have a bunch of little bee grubs. So that's what this is for. It simply says that you put another box on top of this. The regular bees can come, the worker bees can come up through it, and then but the queen stays out.
Is it plastic?
It can be plastic or it can be metal. Those are the 2 types that we've got. This is called the inner cover. It goes above the supers.
And it has a bee space.
It has a hole. It can be used for a variety of things. In the wintertime, if you need to feed, you can have a hole here and actually have honey, sugar water inside to feed your bees. But it's primarily used to regulate temperature and humidity in the hive, and to be able to take, this is called the outer cover. You want to set it on there? The outer cover sits on top of the inner cover. And when you lift the outer cover, if you don't have an inner cover on there, some of those frames that are on the inside are stuck to that outer cover, and you lift it up, and those frames come up with it, which creates a mess. And so you have that inner cover in there, and that keeps that from happening. Now, there are two types of tops. That's called a migratory top. And you don't use an inner cover with it. And they're used a lot by commercial beekeepers. And you can simply put your hive tool in and pop it loose, and it pops loose from the frames that are inside there. You don't have that problem. It's an 8 or 9 frame top on a 10 frame box. But yeah, that's it. And of course, this is the telescoping. And you notice on that one, it would go to the sides, but it doesn't hang over hardly at all. This goes completely over the box. I didn't get quite in the right place, but now if you want to get a discussion going among beekeepers, this is a good thing to talk about. You can get a really violent thing going here, and almost any topic you can get a pretty good discussion
Where is the
going.
queen at?
The queen will be in the brood boxes down at the very bottom. Hopefully below this thing called the queen excluder. Okay, we've already talked about frames coming in deep, mediums, and shallows. They can be easily assembled with glue, a square, and a brad nailer. You know those little things go. They come with this set of nails. And if you want to have a fun evening trying to hold that little nail and tap it together while everything's glued up, but once I was in a previous life, I was a shop teacher, and I learned about these things called power tools. And if I can just sit there and go, I can make a group of these, and so I'm just telling you all that. Even if you don't own one, but you know somebody that has one, borrow it for the one night that you're making your frames. You do want to use a square. It's really hard to make your frames square after they dry. You do want to use glue on every surface it touches while you're putting them together, because really what holds that frame together when you're all done is glue. The one nail that as you're putting these together, what's the most important nail, David?
The one that goes right in here in the end with your wax foundation.
Okay.
So you don't have them with the plastic foundation.
Yeah, but you still would have that nail.
Yeah. This don't have it, but you can have it.
What he's talking about here, like this, David. You're putting nails in here, or in here, and here, and here. But the one that's important is the one that comes here and here, because when you're pulling this frame up out of the hive, it's all glued in there, and you're popping like this. If all you have are nails here, you just pull the top off your frame. That's why it's really important to have these nails in right here in this area, okay? Okay, when you use wax foundation, it looks like this, and it's really flimsy. It has wires. You can buy it without wires, especially for those of you that like comb honey. Y'all know what I'm talking about with the comb that's actually in. Well, you buy it without the wires if you're going to make comb honey. But it has wires running this way. But you also stretch a wire going across in here, and that gives it support. And you got a little tool called an embedding tool that you put it in. And this is so that when you put it in the extractor, and it's going round and around with all that centrifugal force spinning the honey off of it, if you didn't have those wires in there, what do you think would happen to the wax foundation? It blows right out. That's when plastic foundation doesn't blow out. But bees don't like plastic because it doesn't smell natural. It doesn't appear to be, so you have to trick them. Now this is what they call waxed foundation. They're lying. You never get enough wax on these things that come from the people that you buy it from. You end up And this is really not enough. But can you see where I've smeared more wax on it? You heat it up with a paintbrush and you paint it on, and that gives the bees, and the bees will move the wax. In fact, if you don't give them enough wax, they'll steal wax off the bottom to build their comb up on the top, and then you won't have any comb down at the bottom. And they go out in nature and get theirs, but it's much easier for them if you go ahead and provide it for them. You want to have beekeepers get in an argument?
Which foundation do you?
This right here, there's an argument for you. There's groups on both sides of that one. Which do the bees prefer? Beeswax. It's what they make naturally. Smells like them. Actually, it'll smell like the queen. Her pheromones that she puts off is what makes every bee in the hive recognize it as part of the hive. Oh, by the way, black foundation makes it really easy to see the little white eggs. These things, especially for people like me, you know, that are getting along and you're trying to see the little eggs down in there, because I don't have to find the queen. If I open up my hive and I see those little bitty eggs down in the bottom of there, what do I know?
You know she's there.
I've got a queen. I don't have to find her, you know, but this makes it a lot easier to find than the yellow colored, because they look a lot like it.
And the bees don't seem to care, black or yellow.
No. As long as it's got plenty of wax, they're good.
Ask two different beekeepers.
Where to get your hives? Oh, wait a second, I got a wire in this. Okay, you want to tell them about wiring, dude? You're the expert in that.
How come I'm an expert on wiring?
Because I've never wired one in my
Because I
life.
only use wax foundation. And so I put the wires in. And I have a jig that I can put this in, and I roll a wire here, and I just roll that wire through there, and then nail it down on the end, and then I can put the foundation in there, then the wax won't warp or disappear or go into the honey whenever you're extracting.
And I use pins, which are, if you notice, I know you can't see, the same place you ran the wire through, yeah, this is the pin. But the same place that the wire goes through, I can use those pins that stick out about this far on the foundation, and the bees wax over and attach it to that, and that's what I've used. It's much simpler. I'm not saying better, I'm saying simpler, and I'm kind of lazy. Where do you go buy a hive if you want to buy a hive? We have hog-eye honey, which is right out. We have hog-eye honey right outside the door here that would be glad to sell you hives. We have another gentleman called the Arkansas Hive Right that builds hives here in northwest Arkansas. We've got Central Beekeepers Supply down in the Russellville area. If you go online, there's all kinds of places that you can buy stuff from. If you're interested, in fact, when you came in the door, we had some Man Lake catalogs. If you ever get on their mailing list, you can count on a catalog a year for the next 15 years. You know, they will send it regularly, you know, so you can get on, or if you're a basic skills woodworker, you can make your own. And there's a company called, or not a company, a website called beesource.com that has all the plans. They're free. You just go to beesource.com, and now I am not trying to knock out our local distributors, but if you have basic skills, you can build your own. And we're ready to start. Assembling your hive. When assembling your hive, use water-resistant exterior-grade glue on all surface-to-surface points in a joint. How come? Why do you want to use water-resistant glue? It's exposed to it, you're gonna check to make sure the boxes are square as you build them. It's really tough to make them square after they dry. After they've been put together, and when you're trying to balance this whole thing, you want it to sit one right perfectly on top of another. Use nails and screws to hold them together. The joints at the top and the bottom have a tendency to fail, so make sure you reinforce them. With fasteners and glue as you put them together. When you're making your hive, that's the time to paint them. This is a brand new hive. This is just like it came from the distributor. It needs 2 more coats of paint on it at least. I know you probably can't see, but there's little cracks around the finger joints, the box joints in there. Water will get in 2 years you'll come out and see this thing and it will be rotten. Or you can put on 2 or 3 good coats of paint right now, and just if you notice that it's starting to fade, do something. Wintertime is a time when beekeepers take care of their equipment. This is the time when you build your boxes and stuff, because when spring gets here, all of a sudden you need it, and you need it now. Okay, they call you and they come collect the swarm. You better have a box to put it in, or Jim won't call you again. Part of our club is we provide mentors for people that are new in doing this. We provide, we have a swarm list that you can get on if you know how to catch bees and stuff and are willing and have the time to go catch them. We have extractors that you can use. So there's a lot of benefits to being, for the $15 it costs you to be a part of our bee club. It says,
Hills on these, or what kind of paint do you use?
this is as it came from the company. I use, and I'm going to tell you this here in a second too. In fact, this is a pretty good example. This is the top I made. Don't you love the color? This is called Oops paint. You go to Lowe's or Home Depot and somebody orders some paint and then they refuse it, and they will put some other kind of paint in there so that person that refused it doesn't come buy it at the cheaper price. Bees don't care what color your boxes are. So I got, a gallon of bare best paint for $5. So it paints a lot of hives, and everything. Now, this is not my color.
Is there a certain kind of paint you don't use?
You use exterior grade, but you can use oil-based, you can use latex, it doesn't matter.
There you go.
Yeah, it's just make sure it's exterior grade and make sure that you fill every crack. I use a caulk with my finger and just fill every crack, and then I let it dry and I paint it, and these things will last you forever. And I said this, last time we were in Home Depot, the girl said, we had some that was an Oops, and she goes, "Oh, I'll change the shade. Tell me about what color you want." I said, it doesn't matter to them, because anyhow, so I'm just telling you that you can get some Oops paint and it'll save you. Changing the tools of the trade, and this will go pretty quick. These tools right up here are the very basic tools of beekeeping. There are catalogs, and I mentioned Man Lake out here, that are full of stuff for beekeepers. But really, this is what you grab every day when you go out to work your bees. You've all seen this tool, right? The smoker. And bees, we communicate a lot with our eyes. Bees communicate a lot by smell, by pheromones and things. And what you're doing when you're smoking them, it confuses them so that they can't communicate. Like, let's all of us sting that guy right there that's trying to work in our hive here, and you give him a couple of puffs of smoke, and they say, "I can't, were you saying something?" And it confuses them. You're not trying to kill them with the smoke, you're just simply trying to disorient them. All kinds of organic material can be used in the smoker. And this is what a smoker looks like. You build a fire on the inside of it there. It says, and here it says pine needles is the one. And in this area, I can say, you can use burlap, you can use cotton, like cotton t-shirts, don't get the synthetic in there, but cotton. But the easiest thing, go get you a 5-gallon bucket in the middle of the summer, fill it completely up with pine needles, you're good for the year. Do it one day a year, fill that 5-gallon bucket up, put it in your garage, and you're good for the year. Didn't cost anything for your smoker material. A smoker with a cage, you notice this one here has a cage built around it. That protects you, and it protects these things that you might set it up against. you gotta be careful with these. If you set them on your truck bed and you got one of those plastic truck beds, you just melted a hole in it. If you take it in your garage after you're done and you don't know that it's out, you could burn a building down. If you want to get somebody really excited, I have a little metal bucket and you put it in the back of the truck and have this sitting in, in my metal bucket, and people will pull you over saying your truck's on fire. Down the road. So anyhow, I'm just saying that this is a tool, this is a basic tool, and you all understand what it's for. It's not to kill the bees, it's not to, you're just simply trying to disorient them. Now, I'm giving you simple instructions on how to light a smoker. And all of us who have been in this are laughing because we all light our smoker, and we get out there and we start working our bees, and all of a sudden we notice them getting really irritable, and we reach over for our smoker, and it's gone out. It's not a good time. It's one of those, but this is the proper way. You take some of your fuel, you open it up like I just did. It's got a little plate down in the bottom that gives you a little air hole. Right here is where the bellows pushes air into the bottom of the can. You put a handful of fuel in the bottom, you get it started. You add more fuel until you get that thing, and you're puffing it occasionally to keep the fire going. You get it completely crammed full, because that will keep the fire going the longest. You shut it up. As you're working every so often, you give it another couple of puffs to keep it going. If you start puffing it and embers start coming out the end, or what do you think is happening?
Getting too far down?
You burned all of your fuel out and you're just pushing the last thing. And you're not trying, you want cool smoke.
Yeah.
You don't want hot smoke, right? Right, David? You want cool smoke, and you're not trying to overpower them with it. You're just trying to disorient them with it. Okay, David, you tell them about hive tools.
Now, hive tools,
Yeah, you've seen some, haven't you?
yeah, we've got a bunch of hive tools up there. Well, there's different hive tools, and you can get these deals at the big box stores. It's kind of like this, and you can use them for a hive tool. But you want to have more than one hive tool, because you will lose a hive tool now and then.
Usually find them with the lawnmower.
Ouch.
Okay, what do you use the hive tool for?
I use them to lay around on my boxes, so to make sure that I've got one all the time. Well, this one has got the hook on it. I like to use this one, because it's got a hook on it, and you can get it right down between the frames, and you can pull it up, and it don't harm the frame. If you get this thing down here, sometimes there's so much propolis and honey on there that you can break that off, and it don't work too good. So I like the one where you pry, and you can pry it up and then get a hold of it and then pry the other side. But whatever works for you is what you use.
It's your basic tool inside the hive for scraping propolis or bird comb. Bird comb is the comb that place where you don't want it. It can be up on top, it can be on the sides, if you've got a spot down there where you left something open, any of that's called bird comb. It's outside of where your frame foundation area is. And you got hive beetles. You got this thing open, you popped it open, you look down. It's always fun to see somebody with this tool here, and you're trying to kill those little beetles running around on there. And this is I'm not saying it's very successful, but it's kind of fun. Because I don't like hive beetles. So. Okay, tell them about the bee brush.
Bee brush. Got a bee brush, it's got soft bristles in it, and that's what you want. And there's a way to brush the bees off of frames. brush up instead of down. Because the bees, the cells are built on a little bit of a slant up. So whenever they put the nectar in there, it won't run out. And so the bees are down in there, and if you brush up, you brush the bees out of the cells.
Okay.
So that's a good thing to have.
You can use your gloves and your hands. If you ever have them inside of a screened area, don't ever brush them hard, because they got the little feet sticking through the screens, you know, so you don't wanna. What about a frame grip there, David?
Got a frame grip. Handy little tool. You get a hold of the frame and take it out, and it's good for inspecting. Yeah, I think I could just inspect one side of that, because I can't turn it all the way around and look at the other side. So I've got Earl here to turn it around, so I can see the other side and inspect it to see if I've got queen, I've got eggs, I've got whatever I've got in there.
What's the one thing to remember about this?
Don't let loose of it.
I hear the bees don't mind the trip down, but when they don't like the landing, you know, and everything, and all this stuff we're laughing about, you understand, all of a sudden you got bees that are mad, you know, they're not just, and you have to get, and I don't blame them. You know, you just took them out of their house and you dropped them on the ground, and bees don't do good in grass and stuff, getting up out of there, and anyhow, if you use these, you better keep a good grip on it.
So how does the queen stay in there without coming out?
She's down below.
Okay,
Bees will stay on this frame.
I'm talking about the queen.
yeah,
Queen,
she'll
she'll stay on there too,
She stays inside this hive her whole life after she goes on her mating.
unless she's swarmed.
The other bees go in and out.
Because of that exclusion.
Well, she really is never, the queen doesn't have any place to go. The only time she's gonna leave after her mating flights, and I know I'm getting off on her subject, but it is when the other bees say, hey, it's time for you to move on. And they take her and they put her on a diet so that she can fly, because she's been so fat for so long, and they got her, and they push her out to the front, and that's called a swarm. That's the only time she's gonna leave, you know, on her own, you know, after she's gone on her mating flights and everything. What about the frame perch there, David?
Handy little tool. And I found mine, I lost it and I found it with the lawnmower. And I quit using it. But you put it fits right down on the side of the box, and then you can take the frames out and inspect them, and then you can put one or two of them on this frame rest. And then you've got room to move your other frames around and look at it, and it gives you more room to work.
And I had a little note here. Remember, the more stuff you have is the more stuff you gotta keep up with. That's kind of what we were saying about finding stuff with lawnmowers and stuff. I even forget my smoker. You know, I go from one spot to the next spot, and I have to turn around and go back and get my smoker and my hive tool. So the more stuff you have, the more you gotta keep. But all of these tools, you can tell, would be handy to have when you're there. Protective gear. The minimum for beekeepers is a veil. And you can kind of see this gentleman over here wearing one, although I would suggest that you don't wear a black shirt while you're doing this. And the veil, Dave's kind of showing you, it's the top half up there. It protects the head and the face and the eyes. It's easy to put on and take off. It should help keep bees from coming underneath of it. You want to see the bee bellies, not the bee backs. If you're looking at the bee inside a veil and you see their backs, that means they're inside the veil with you. But also, some people get really excited to jerk the veil off, but you gotta remember, you've got 30,000 bees out there with you, you know, when you just took it off, and they're mad and stuff when you have one bee on the inside. So you might take your pick. It's light and cool. The veil is the simplest form of protective gear. The jacket, and I should have Annette wear this. Okay, we're about done, yeah.
And I'll be.
It is hers.
In your body.
In fact, Zach, can you buy this for your mom? Yeah. Jackets provide a good layer of equipment, and this is what most of us use. They have little loops on the sleeves for the most time. If you look, why don't you hold up and show everybody? Y'all see that loop that's on the sleeve? That's to go around your thumb. So as you pull on your gloves, you don't pull your sleeve up. And a lot of times I don't wear that. And the first time I know that I didn't put that in is when the bees I can feel them on my skin right here, and I know that I'm in trouble. You know that. So that's what that little loop is for, and you should use it because then you pull your gloves up and it covers your sleeve, and you're protected. These can get hot. They make them in ventilated models, depending on how much you want to spend and how much you have to make the decision. It doesn't do you any good if you forget to zip. They zip here, they zip here, they zip here, and then you got a Velcro strap that goes over here. And if you forget one of those, the bees will remind you.
What about your ankles?
I'm getting to that. It's coming up here. You're getting it. In fact, but it's two more springs up ahead of you here. And you have several hood choices you can make. You know, they have the fencing veil, which is this style, or you can have the round style, like what Annette has on there. You have to, again, make a decision. You want to get a discussion going among beekeepers. This is another really good one to go with. And they now make them in children's sizes, any extra big. Make sure you get your jacket or your equipment big. You don't want it close to you. You don't want the bees to be able to sting you. You want to be able to move around in it. Full coveralls. And when I got into beekeeping, what did I need? I want to be protected. I wanted to be in the full coveralls. And that didn't last very long. You're kind of uncomfortable, but I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm saying if it makes you feel better while you're working your bees, protect yourself here. They're the hottest thing that you can be wearing in the summertime. Again, remember to zip all the things that need to be zipped. They can be somewhat confining when you're bending over picking up stuff, but they are available in all sizes.
Looks like sienna.
Now, David, weren't you saying something?
I said you might ought to wear gloves.
Well, what about your socks thing that we were talking about there? Yeah, tell me.
Might get something to put around your ankles of your jeans, because bees will crawl up your legs and make you do the scent by the dance. So if you get some kind of a elastic thing or a strap or something to put around your ankles so the bees can't crawl up there, but they will get down there and they'll find any little crack that you've got that they can get into you, and they'll get it.
If you want a really exciting thing or a conundrum, you feel one crawling up your leg. How far are you going to let it crawl? You're working bees and stuff, you feel it, and you know this is not going to end well. Where do you want it to end? Type thing. So you have to work on that one. Also, if you have holes in your jeans, like this, duct tape works really well. Make sure you put it on before you go out there and work and stuff, because they'll remind you that duct tapes are in. Okay, and gloves. Gloves are sting resistant, not sting proof. You will get stung through your gloves occasionally. Gloves cause a loss of touch when you're working your bees. You'll crush some bees and stuff. You will not have the touch. I love working with Ed. Ed's out there, he didn't wear gloves on there, and I've watched him. He gets stung, and he just kind of, I'll be screaming, and everything, but he just, but people like that ability to be able to move stuff, and as you get more experienced, you may decide not to wear gloves. Or you may wear these latex or nitrile gloves because you're working with that propolis and it's getting all over your hands and making a mess, and at the end of it, you can just take it off. Won't keep you from getting stung. So you'll have to make a choice on the gloves. We're done, Mrs. Trump.
And we do have a mentoring and an apprenticeship program. It's completely free if you're a member of our club. We pair experienced beekeepers with new beekeepers. So if you're looking at all this and thinking, man, I could never figure all that out, don't worry. If you're part of our club, we're going to pair you with somebody that has a lot of experience and can teach you how to do this, especially in the beginning. I mean, we expect our mentees to research on their own and learn all they can. We're not gonna, take them by the hand, but we're going to provide the support they need to become confident beekeepers. So just like Earl mentioned, that's another plus of being part of our club. I'm gonna have a door prize drawing.